Welcome to Seahawks Draft Log live stream. Rob Staten, Robbie Williams here. I believe Adam Nathan's going to join us in a little while. Let's just get into it, Robbie. Super chat away if you want to have a comment, if you want it to appear on the screen, support the channel, etc. That is one of the worst losses of the Pete Carroll era. That was an absolute disgrace, Robbie, today. The Seahawks had an easy win right in the palm of their hands. They completely controlled the first half. And then they come out in the second half and everything was wrong. They completely mismanaged the offense in that second half, because when Geno Smith got injured, Robbie, they were on a run of 16 plays. They ran the ball twice, a 14-2 pass run split. When you have a comfortable lead, the key for the game, because of the way that the Rams are, should have been to run the ball heavily. So what are they doing? You know, this team constantly talks about its identity being they want to run the freaking ball. Why are they not running the ball, Robbie? Why do they refuse week after week after week to run the football? It made absolutely no sense whatsoever. And they carried on when Drew Lock came in. You've still got a handsome lead when Drew Lock comes into that game, Robbie. Why are they throwing the ball 3 times of Drew Lock, risking interceptions with a cold quarterback? Why are they doing that? It makes absolutely no sense. As we welcome Adam into the chat here. Adam, I'm just starting off with a rant. But about the play calling at the end, it makes absolutely no sense to throw it as much as they did in that second half of the lead, to continue throwing it when Drew Lock is in there, put themselves in a hole. The way that they manage that game of football, it is as if that was a rookie head coach who was managing that game, who's never been in that kind of a situation before and has no idea what to do. Pete Carroll is too long in the tooth to throw a game away in that manner. And you know what? The mismanagement of that game continued right until the end. What were they doing? They get a really nice throw to DK Metcalf down the field and get themselves into field goal range. And then there was about 25 to 30 seconds left. You can clock it at that point. You get another throw in. You try and get another 5 to 10 yards maybe to make it an easier field goal. What do? They run the ball for like an extra 2 yards and then just eliminate any possibility of getting any more, and then ask Myers to come in and kick a 50-yarder. Now, look, you know, he's been hitting them in that range, but why wouldn't you make life easier for him? It makes no sense whatsoever. Who has made that call there to run the ball rather than clock it? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. That is one of the all-time worst managed games I think I've ever seen. They have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. They had no business losing that game. And there are all sorts of consistent issues that keep cropping up. You know, that the offense scored 3 points in the second half and went completely cold again. How many times this season have we talked about this, where the offense is so streaky, where it goes from moving the ball with relative ease and looking really good 1 minute to just completely collapsing for an entire half the next? That happened again today. And maybe the injury to Geno Smith contributed to that, but it still happened regardless. The defense couldn't make a play in the second half. There was no pass rush, no pressure. They had no idea how to manufacture pressure. There was no way of stopping the Rams in that second half. Oh, my word. That game is going to define the season. And I've got some big opinions to say that I'll save, and I'll let you guys come in at this point. But that's going to define the season. The 6-4, before they've even got into the big gauntlet of games. They needed to be 7-3 going into Thursday night football against San Francisco. They needed parity for that home game against San Francisco to try and steal a win off them in Seattle and take control of the division. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. And now when I look at this, I actually think, guys, you know, losing the next 4 games is not that impossible. It's not implausible with the run of games they've got. And then what are they? They're 6-8, you know, and I don't want to look too far ahead, but it's hard. It's hard not to feel that way. And if people are having a go at me in the comment section, I don't know if they're Seahawks fans or not, saying that I've lost the plot or something like that. I don't know what game you just watched, quite frankly. Robbie, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, you spend 2 second-round picks back-to-back years on running backs, and you're power running football team, and you want to run the football, and yet, I feel like people are going to blame Locke a lot for this, for this loss, but I think regardless, before he even came in, we had just gone to utter crap since then. It was not a good look the whole time. We were, you had opportunities, like you said, in the second half, come out, establish a run game. I just really burn the clock as much as possible, and do what you can. But they just felt like they just terrible play calling, terrible all around. This was just a really embarrassing football game. I mean, I was shocked, honestly. I was like, wow, we're actually gonna lose this game. And I think at the end of the day, you look at the next 5 games and this is gonna be the gauntlet of ones. You had to have this game. You had to have it. I just don't feel confident in this team at all. At all. And it's sad because I was really excited at the beginning of the season to see what this offense could do. And it's embarrassing. And I have a lot of opinions on the defensive side of the ball too, but I'll let Adam speak. But I'm really frustrated.
Adam?
Yeah, I mean, on a macro level of the season, I think you had to finish that Eagles game 7-7 from a record standpoint, which gives you the Cardinals, Titans, and Steelers left, and you can afford to maybe lose one of them, go 9-8, and that's probably going to be enough. But so that would have been 1-4 for the 5 games, including the one we've just had. But if they can't win that one, I mean, the bookmakers are going to have them more than a field goal underdogs, I would imagine, all 4 of the next games quite comfortably. 2 against San Francisco, Dallas, Philadelphia. And this was supposed to be the easy part of the schedule. What did we say at the start of the season? The best thing we've got going for us is how low quality the NFC is. So if they're still going to struggle to make the playoffs in what is a low quality NFC, apparently, part of me is looking at the team in general, and I was really positive about after the Bengals loss. Said, look, I think this is a really good chance, and there's loads of young players, the core of the team being built. But I've been watching the last 3 or 4 games, just thinking if this is it, and if people are just settling for this as a 9-8, maybe 10-7 team, if you're lucky, and maybe you win a playoff game, well, what's the point of any of it then? Because we had that for ages, and we hated that, and they've rearranged all the deck chairs. Fine, they had to do that last March. That's the decision they came to, and we've got what we've got. And I don't want to make it too broad, straight away and talk about Pete and Russ and the trade and everything. But it does all come back to ultimately the man at the top. And I'm looking at this game thinking, what's the point? What are we trying to be? Because if the aim is to be a championship winning team, which is what we said we really thought we had to be this year, what are we doing? I mean, that was as jittery and as clunky a Seahawks performance as I've seen after the first drive in years and years. They've played badly. They've been beaten at times. That happens. Sometimes you get outplayed, but something just didn't feel right. It reminded me of the games, under Wilson with the play clock running right down. You're not sure what's happening. Are they going to get the playoff? Are they not? It just didn't look right. And I don't know what to attribute that to.
I attribute it to Pete Carroll. That entire game is on Pete Carroll. Just complete mismanagement of the game and really poor. I'll just keep coming back to it. And quite aside from the fact that his record against Sean McVay is embarrassing, the fact that you have your quarterback leave the game and you have to put Drew Lock in, who had a handful of passes in the New York game, which was weeks ago, and that's it. And you're putting your backup in. And any of us 3 in that situation could have called a better situation for Drew Lock there. If 3 runs and kicking the ball is fine. We don't need to see Drew Lock throwing the ball around the field. We don't need to see him trying to stretch the defense. We don't need to see him trying to throw it to the sideline 30 yards downfield and get it intercepted. We don't need to see that. As soon as Drew Lock came into the game, what was his first play? It was a deep throw down the middle to Jackson Smith-Njigba. Why? Why are they not managing that situation better? Why are they not running the football like Pete Carroll? How we have had Pete Carroll in Seattle since 2010. Even if you aren't a Seahawks fan, if you ask anybody what is synonymous with a Pete Carroll football team, it's running the football. It's spending 2 second-round picks on running backs because they are going to run the heck out the football. That's going to be their mantra. And week after week after week, they refuse to run the football. If there was ever a game to run the ball in that second half, it was today. And in the first 16 plays of the second half, I'll say it again, they ran the ball twice out of 16 plays. And then Geno Smith gets hurt and they carry on throwing the football. They threw the football 40 times in this game. There were 2 sacks. So there were 2 plays that were called throws that were not ultimately thrown. So that's 42. And there was a Geno Smith minus 1 yard run, which I'm going to call a pass as well. So that's 43 called pass plays to 20 runs for your running backs. In a game that you were leading right up until the final 90 seconds of the game. That doesn't make any sense. There's only one thing worse than not having an identity. It's having a clearly established identity and doing the total opposite in a game that you have to have. That's all on Pete Carroll. And I'm afraid I do sympathize with your point of view, Adam. To me, it looks as if the Seahawks have had 2 really good drafts. They've added a lot of talent, but they've got no idea what to do with these players now. Like, the coaches are just not holding up their side of the bargain here. The GM and the scouts and everything have put together a group that you would expect to be somewhat competitive or at least performing better than this. And to have all of this expensive, like, they have maxed out on the cap. They have a few million to spend next year because they've already spent the cap money. They've just traded their second round pick next year for Leonard Williams. Their record since trading for Leonard Williams is an absolute hammering in Baltimore, scraping by the Washington Commanders, who just got beat handsomely by the New York Giants with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. And now they've lost to this shell of a Rams team for the second time. And they've traded the second round pick for this next year. They have maxed out everything to put this roster on the field. And Pete Carroll and Clint Hurt and Shane Waldron and this staff simply aren't getting it done. And if this season goes the way that it now could easily go, I'm sorry to say this, guys. I never thought, a couple of weeks ago we'd be having this conversation 2 days before I fly to Seattle. But I think that what conversation's coming, Robbie. It's time for somebody else to have a go. This is not good enough.
Yeah, we've been avoiding it for a while just because of kind of the backlash that we got last year when we brought it up, or the year before, or whatever, and the amount of scrutiny we got for bringing it up. But I think it is time, and I totally agree. And I see a lot of people in the chat, blaming the refs too, and I agree. The Witherspoon call was crap, but I wouldn't blame the refs in this game. I mean, that one was clearly not a PI and did lead them to get 7, which is not, which is not what you want to see. But I don't think they had ultimate out. I mean, they did get 7 points on the board, but I don't think that's it. I mean, the play calling was garbage the whole time. The offense literally 5 for again, the third down conversions 5 for 15. Like, how are we that bad? We had 4 on our first drive, so we had 1 the rest of the game. That's crap. I can't figure out how we can put together a good first drive like that and can't figure it out the rest of the game. None of this makes any sense to me. It's so frustrating.
That's a good point, Robbie, because it's the same issues, isn't it? It's week 11 now. It's week 11.
Yeah.
We can't, the third down's still crap. The red zone's still crap. The offense is still hot and cold. The defense is still hot and cold. When are they going to clean these things up? It's no good sort of adding penalties to the mix as well. I mean, people are saying that Pete's first comment is the number of penalties they gave away. Yeah, that's a huge issue, Pete. But again, that goes to you. The responsibility lies on your team if they're not clean in week 11. You have to be cleaner. Yeah, the refs weren't great today. Absolutely. But come on, let's not blame the refs today. If the Seahawks had run the ball 40 times and thrown it 25 with Geno Smith leaving the game, I'd listen to that argument. This was self-inflicted loss. This was a shooting yourself in the foot loss. And we are seeing the same mistakes week after week after week. Adam, I'd put to you that the Seahawks are quite fortunate to be 6-4. They a header from Jamal Adams away from losing to the Browns. There's been other games where it's been unnecessarily close. They had the third easiest schedule in the NFL going into the Baltimore game. And then after the Baltimore game, they had the hardest schedule remaining in the NFL. They're now 1-2 with that hardest schedule. And the only team they beat, the Commanders, who I mentioned, have just lost to the Giants. And not just lost to the Giants, they've been hammered by the Giants in their own backyard today. So I think this is quite telling. And I think it's unavoidable, Adam. You know, how many more years are we going to be talking about the same things? You know, problems in season that never get fixed. You know, is it just if we get to 9 wins, is that enough for everybody to go, okay, let's have another go? You know, what are we doing here? It doesn't feel like we're moving forward as a franchise.
Well, that sort of brings me back to my whole sort of what's the point argument, because Pete Carroll is going to be the head coach next year. We know that's going to happen. And he'll probably be the head coach the year after if he wants to. And I think we've all said the talent on this team is as good as I think we've seen for a number of years. I mean, I can't think of a team since 2016 that's had anything like the depth on defense this team has. Like, the defense played pretty well today and held up the offense for long periods of the game, I thought. Then, you know, on one hand, you've got people saying, look at the receivers we've got. We've got 3 of the best receivers in the game. We've got a good stable of tight ends. We've got 2 running backs. We've got Gino, who's supposed to be, you know, who's at least passable. Well, then why are you saying we should be 9-8? Because you're telling me we've got all these great players. So we should be better than that. And I know it all comes back down to coaching, but what are we going to do? Are we going to, maybe we will, are we going to do an hour a week after every loss saying, why is Pete Carroll the head coach? I mean, I'm up for it, but you know, what are we going to do? Because that's the way of it. And I think the thing that frustrated me most about today is that the Rams had given up. Middle of the third quarter, they weren't doing anything. It was inside handoff, maybe an outside pass to an Atwell and see what happens. They weren't even trying. They were so happy to get out of here. And they were saying, look, Rob and Robbie and Adam have got a stream. Let's give them a midnight start. Let's do them a favor. Let's just get out of here. This is finished. They'd given up. And one play from Aaron Donald turns it round. But let's be honest, the Seahawks had lost their way long time before Geno Smith got injured today. And it just looked like both teams were happy just to fart the game out for a quarter and a half and just go home. Thanks very much. Yeah, I wouldn't mind it if you lose to the Niners or whatever and you've got a big lead and they come back and they just overpower you. The Rams had packed it in. And that's what really frustrates me about this, because the whole season's going to probably twinge on that game. At best, because it might give you a much worse seed to play if we do get into the playoffs. At worst, it could kick us out altogether. And I can picture Matt Stafford just handing the ball off to Darrell Henderson with no interest in getting a first down, and we've lost. I'm staggered by it.
I'm looking at my notes from the game because I kind of gave up. I actually write the notes just before the initial Rams touchdown, which got them back in the game. And I've just wrote here, messiest flea flicker ever, leading to a Tariq Woolen pick and a Stafford injury. Now, when he threw that interception, that was the game. It was awful. Like it was horribly choreographed, the flea flicker. It was an absolute mess. He then stepped up into pressure to throw the ball downfield, and it was just a hopeful heave downfield. It was like an arm punt, which was picked off. I mean, it was a high-quality arm punt, but it was still an arm punt. I'm surprised he got the ball off because he moved up into the pocket into pressure Stafford there when he could have scrambled away from it and maybe thrown the ball away because it was the whole thing wasn't working. But at that point, that should have been game over. That's where you get the ball back. You run the ball at that point. You take the sting out the clock and you just go home with a comfortable win. That's when it all fell apart. I mean, how can it fall apart from that point there when you come out throwing with Drew Lock and you just threw the ball straight back to him, to them? It's just absolutely crazy. Why did they keep throwing with Drew Lock in there? And I think Robbie's point, he mentioned it off air and on air, is that I think what a lot of people take away from this, and I already saw it on Twitter, was people going, how dare you ever question Geno Smith? And it's like, oh, come on, is that really the story from this? It's not. It's the horrible way the game was managed. On this stream, we never called for Drew Lock to start. I think we were all pretty realistic about, well, Drew Lock's not starting for a reason here. He's not better than Geno Smith. There's been no clamour from us for Drew Lock to start a game of football for the Seattle Seahawks. But that's not why they lost, because he had to come in and Geno Smith had to go out. It was just an appallingly managed game by Pete Carroll. And he shouldn't be allowed to just, mention penalties if that's what's happened. Someone needs to say to him, what on earth happened in that game? How on earth have you lost that? How did you chuck that away? I want to get through some super chats, and then, Robbie, I'm going to come back to you. David says Waldron out. He's absolutely at this point proven. We've seen. I feel like we've seen enough from Shane Waldron. He is not an inspire. There was one play, guys. I don't know if you saw this. I can't remember if it was a third down or what down in distance it was, but Geno Smith drops back to throw. One player ran a route, and it was DK Metcalf. It was quite early in the game, and he went across the formation and then up. And there were two defenders just, safety in a corner with him. It's not open. It's never on. And I can't remember if Geno got sacked or whether or what happened there, or he got hit or something.
I think the injury was exactly the same. DK running from the left of the field like a post, and he was just the only Seahawks player on the screen. I'm
not being facetious here. He was literally the only option. There was no check down. There was no safety valve. There was no, okay, if DK is not open here, you can at the very least check it down to a running back, or you can check it down to a tight end, or a receiver running across. Like it was basically, that's the play. Like, I don't know if it was a case of we're going to line up as if it's a power run or something, and then, whoa, it's a throw. How often you've still got to have at least one player in that instance, if DK's covered, who you can get the ball out to. And it's so basic. It's so bad. He's got no concept of flow of the game. Carroll takes ultimate responsibility, because he needs to say to Shane Waldron, run the ball. For God's sake, man, run the ball here. I'm in charge of running the football. But even then, don't throw it. What were they doing there? Why were they throwing it as much as they were? So yeah, I'm done with Shane Waldron. But then I don't think Clint Hurt is a defensive coordinator that would be. I don't think. Let's put it this way, guys. I'm just asking before we go on to the next super chat. Robbie, Adam, would Shane Waldron be, if Shane Waldron left the Seahawks tomorrow, would he be an offensive coordinator next season in front of the team?
No, I guess he'd be like a quarterback's coach or something.
At best.
Yeah.
Adam?
Yeah, but then that's indicative of the offensive coordinators and, in a way, defensive coordinators that Pete Carroll likes to have.
Exactly. They don't go anywhere else. Like Darrell Bevell he was part of a Super Bowl winning team, but ultimately the other coordinators, Ken Norton, Brian Schottenheimer's in Dallas to basically just do whatever Mike McCarthy wants, a bit like when he was with Pete Carroll. There's no, and Clint Hurt wouldn't be a defensive coordinator anywhere else. He might get a D-line job. He would never, no other team would appoint Clint Hurt to be a defensive coordinator except the Seahawks. Mike says the Seahawks play sloppy, undisciplined football because their coaching is sloppy and undisciplined. Fire Pete Carroll. It's Mike's view on the super chat. Kyle says, wish I could buy you all a beer and commiserate in person. Imagine if Shanahan, McVay, or Reed had this offensive unit and players, what they could do. Thanks to the super chat, Kyle. Yeah, I was thinking that again. Look, there's every chance when you appoint an offensive coach that you could end up with an Arthur Smith rather than a Kyle Shanahan or a Sean McVay or a Andy Reid. There's every chance you could end up with an Arthur Smith. And there are other examples that aren't very good either. But I'm kind of at the point now where I'm not afraid of that possibility. It's time to embrace the unknown to an extent and try. Just sort of plodding along forever is not. No, we need to be better than this. Hal says Pete will not be fired unless the team sells. I tend to agree with you, Hal. But I still think you've got to voice a bit of frustration at the head coach after a day like this. And just look, we all want the Seahawks' aim has to be to win the Super Bowl, not to make up the numbers in the playoffs, not to finish with 9-8 record or 10-7 record and call that a job well done. And not piss away games like this. Noah says, I see a maximum of 2 wins on the schedule and ready for changes at head coach, offensive coordinator, and quarterback. We started 4 out of 4 on third down and finished 1-11. Terrible. Same problems every week. Thank you, Noah. 12th Man North says, hey, gents, you are right on the coaching. This roster has the talent to be so much better. This game is a clear illustration of a coaching staff adjusting, Rams, and one that can't, Seahawks, which has been a problem over and over again. And Primo says, Waldron and his basic play calling in the fourth quarter. Waldron and his basic play calling through 10 games, I'm afraid, Primo. He's just not good enough. It's just not good enough. Thank you for all the super chats. Keep them coming in. We'll do another batch. If you keep those coming, support the channel, give us your views, and I'll post them up. Robbie, it's very easy to sort of talk about just the game managing. I could probably do a whole hour ranting about that on my own. But when it comes to sort of other aspects of it, the offense was bad, but let's not give the defense a pass here. No pass rush. Nobody could make a play. That play by Tariq Woolen was a terrible flea flicker. There's just nobody was stepping up to the plate. The coach wasn't stepping up with a great call. There was nothing. It was like a hot knife through butter at the end.
Yeah, specifically, I think I will be absolutely shocked if Quandre Diggs is here next year. I'm just going to say that he has been terrible. He was really, really bad today, and it was really noticeable how bad he was. And I'm surprised he keeps, getting the playing time that he's getting. I mean, I know we have injuries now at the safety position, but like he's just not good. I don't understand why we paid him as much as we did and why we're investing so heavily on the safety position. And I'm like really confused by it. And watching him play today was just abysmal.
Yeah, well, don't tell him that, Robbie, because he,
Oh, I know. He needs to be updated on his bad ratings. Yeah.
Bloody hell. I mean, he was quote tweeting Matty Brown this week because Matty said that he's actually a great safety. I mean, and then there was Michael Sean Dugar telling everybody before the game today that he's an elite top 10 safety. I mean, those are the kind of tweets that I would wait till after the game to probably just have them in your drafts, because when he plays like that, he's currently PFF 65th rated safety. I don't know where he'll be after this, but 65 or top 10, I'm leaning closer to 65th at this point. However critical Quandre Diggs might want to be about PFF. I mean, I'm almost tempted, Robbie, to play the peacock thing because he's becoming as much of a peacock as Jamal Adams. I mean, he's got a very high opinion of himself, and the performance is not living up to the talk. We had a whole summer of telling us how great he is. He's very vocal now. I mean, less this, more results, please, is what I would say. I mean, how many turnovers has he had this year? How many big plays has he had? I'll have a look at the stats. Adam, have you got a thought on Diggs or the defense for that matter?
Not on Diggs specifically, because I don't know enough about tape to really give an opinion either way, outside of the fact that Diggs is obviously not having the big play impact that he was having last year. But now that I think back in the game, the defensive line looked quite frisky at the start. And then I don't think they laid a glove on Stafford really towards the end of it. And I just wonder if that's an indictment on Clint Hurt and the schemes they're trying to run, that, where they come out the gate and they show Stafford something that looks pretty impressive and there's loads of speed and whatever. And then Stafford just sort of worked it out. And he was spinning around people. He became a running threat at some point. A guy hasn't run for 25 years, but he was spinning away from Boye Mafe. And I just wonder if he looked at the construction of the line and the linebackers and just thought, well, they're going to do that. He's going to do that. He's going to do that. I've sussed you out now. And I don't think we laid a glove on him for the last 2.5 quarters of the game, did we? And then, towards the end of the game, he worked out that area, in the middle of the field was just wide open the whole time, with or without Cooper Kupp. But yeah, defensively, I wonder, and there'll be tape people that will know the answers to this, but I wonder if sort of Clint Hurt's scheme was made to look a little bit basic by Stafford, who just diagnosed what was going on, and then they didn't get near him after that.
I think it's a horrible cocktail of not having a blue chip defensive lineman who can blow up a game, or a couple of really effective pass rushers who, and by that I mean, Max Crosby type, for example. Not necessarily a Myles Garrett, because he's a unicorn. Even in a, even if you put Myles Garrett next to Nick Bosa, I mean, Myles Garrett possibly could be the MVP this year in the entire league. That's how good he is. But they don't have anybody like that. And yet schematically, they are not clever enough. They're not even like, there are certain teams who can be quite frustrating to watch at times, but then in the vital moment, a very experienced, proven defensive coordinator will make a call that will just be the difference in a game. And Hurts not capable of that, and they don't have the players capable enough to make a big impact. Just on Quandre Diggs, I'll read you his. I've got his stats up here. So, okay. Sacks, none. Fumbles, none. Fumbles recovered, none. Interceptions, 1. And 42 total tackles. Obviously, I can go into PFF and have a look at premium stats, but essentially he's had 1 interception all season, and that was in the New York Giants game. I think if memory serves, that was right towards the end when it was desperation time as Daniel Jones was being pummeled, as he was all year, and he just threw one up, and Quandre Diggs picked it off, and the game was already won at that point. So he's just not making it. And look, not just a pile on him, it just feels like he's the most vocal of the group, and in very defensive and a little bit precious about what people think about him. And
I would love to see how many missed tackles he says. If someone could dig that up, that'd be sweet.
I'll have a look. I'll have a look on the old PFF. I can get the premium stats up in a second. But just a quick reminder that his cap number for next year is $21.2 million, and Jamal Adams, who didn't play, is $27 million. It's just absolutely remarkable. They can't. This is the problem, Robbie, is that they've gone all in. This is what we see today. I mentioned this earlier. This roster is the Seahawks putting all of the chips into the middle of the table. They are maxed out. I don't think fans realize this. I think fans kind of think, it's year 2, they can still do this, they can still do that. No. There's a crossroads coming in the offseason. The first thing they're going to have to do is make a decision on Geno Smith's contract. That's the first, it's unavoidable. It either has to come down in cost, or he has to renegotiate, or they have to cut him as a post June 1st to save $22.5 million. It's a big call, but making that call is going to be significant. And the problem they've got is you have to probably make that call before the new league year starts. And the minute that you cut Geno Smith, you tip your hand for the draft. So it's probably going to mean a renegotiation that they can perhaps get out of if he doesn't win the job over the summer. So it's good. It's a good-ish position to be in for the Seahawks, but it's also fraught with issues here. This relationship could suffer as a consequence of this negotiation, and that's a problem. At the same time, they have these 2 safeties who are going to be taking up a lot of dead money to cut them. They're not worth $50 million between them, and that's what they're due at the minute. That a decision needs to be made there. And then you've got a whole bunch of free agents that are coming up as well. So you have to make a decision on this. This roster could look very different. And the problem that they've got is they don't have the resources at the moment to even re-sign, I'd say, half of their starters. They've got $6 million to spend. So there has to be an awful lot of change. Financial decisions need to be made just to keep most of the roster together next offseason. It's a huge offseason for the Seahawks. And like I say, it could mean big names being cut, big names walking. You're going to have to raise money somehow to keep key players. If you want to improve, you've got to make big decisions. If Leonard Williams isn't just going to be a 10-game rental, you need to save money somehow. And in the draft, you don't have a second-round pick anymore. This is huge. I don't think fans are really aware of how messy the offseason could be, because Robbie and Adam, Robbie, I'll come to you first, they have put everything into this window. They beat the Browns and they've gone all in on this year. And since beating the Browns, they've been hammered by the Ravens. They've had this horrendous, disgraceful loss to the Rams, and they squeaked by the Washington Commanders, who are awful. What a sorry state of affairs. It really is, isn't it, Robbie?
No, yeah, it really is. And I think this kind of the cherry on top is after we got that win, they went out and traded a second-round pick for Leonard Williams and a 5th. If it was just the 5th, or maybe a fourth, I would have been okay with that. But the second really stings. And you're right, the cap number next year, I know people will talk about how they think there's more, there's not. And the reality is like there's going to have to be a lot of changes this year. And maybe that's a sign that Pete's trying to go all in for this year because maybe he knows this is last. I mean, maybe that's wishful thinking, but I don't know. I'm just tired of having this mediocre team with, that should be better and just, we're always fighting just for the chance to get in the playoffs. I want to be one of the dominant teams, and just to the point now where it's just super frustrating. And you can't tip your hat, like you said, going into the next draft. So if you cut Geno prior to that, you've shown your hand.
If you cut Geno Smith before the draft, because we all can see, but we saw it today, that Drew Lock is not the answer. Unless you sign somebody else who is a name, you are telling the entire league we're drafting a quarterback with our first pick, and you are leaving yourself wide open to leaks on who you like and teams guessing who you like, teams jumping ahead of you for who you like. It's really, that's a problem. So you cannot, but again, like, Bobby Wagner, Leonard Williams, Jordan Brooks, Noah Fant, Colby Parkinson, Damian Lewis, Phil Haynes, DJ Dallas. These are all free agents. There's more. There's people I'm forgetting who are also free agents. And you might say, well, then, don't keep any of them, but they have to be replaced somehow. So if you're not keeping them, you have to go and sign somebody else. You've not got a second-round pick anymore, so you can't just draft people to replace all of these players. And if you draft people to replace all those players, you are going to be the youngest team in the NFL by an absolute mile. Like, you are not having you're not taking a step forward next year. If you replace all of these players with younger players, you're going to take a step back. You are taking probably a couple of steps back. So you need to create some money that they don't have. They've gone all in on this year. And that's the part of maybe the only thing I would say, because I think I agree with Adam, and I agree with that super chat earlier saying Pete ain't going anywhere. But they've been so aggressive this year. I'm kind of thinking, well, I don't know. They've put everything into the middle. Why? What's so important about this year? Like, to do that? Did they just get carried away? I mean, did they just think, oh, look, we beat the Browns, come on, and get a bit emotional there? But you've got to be more adult than that, haven't you? You've got to be self-aware of where you are as a team, and they weren't ready for that. I've got again, I don't want to just focus on Quandre Diggs, but I've got the premium stats here. So I can tell you, Robert, before this game, he'd missed 9 tackles, and his missed tackle percentage was 18%. But I don't know how many he's missed. The stats obviously are not in yet. So he'd missed 9 tackles this year. No sacks, no hits, no hurries, no batted passes. 8 of his tackles were assisted. Been targeted 12 times, given up 8 receptions. He's got, people are throwing 66.7% completion on him when they target him. 1 interception, 1 pass breakup, just 1 all year. 1 in week 7. And he plays, I'm just looking at the stats, he's played 564 snaps at free safety. He's just basically playing exclusive free safety. 1 pass breakup was against the Cardinals, by the way. So it's not very good. Adam, a thought? Because, again, I've kind of tried to explain the situation. A lot of people don't want to hear it. They think that the Seahawks are just kind of, well, it's year 2 and all of this, but there's some huge decisions coming for this team.
Yeah, there's massive decisions to the point where I think you're right. You renamed your thing the rebuild, but in a way, it's the rebuild for this iteration of the team is almost over at the end of this year because they've got so many people that need to be swapped in and out in the next offseason. But the question I would ask is, what did they think the plan was with quarterback going forward? Because the way it looks right now is that they believed what a lot of people that I see in the media and online would say in the maybe the years that Wilson wasn't quite as hot, was that with the Pete's offense, you can just plug someone in. You just need someone just to find the read, pick the pass, and there you go. But that's obviously massively reductive and dismissive of the wonderful player that Russell Wilson was as a Seahawk. And it just strikes me that I don't really understand what they think they're doing at quarterback, because they haven't got the resources. You know, that they've used their big resource year or resources year on not drafting, fine. But last year was probably, or the last draft was the one to do it. So what's the plan here? Because it strikes me that they just think that, well, Gino can do it. And full credit to Gino. I thought he, to come back into the game and lead that drive, didn't have to do that. And that's amazing credit to the guy for really gutting it out when he was clearly in pain. And I've got the utmost, he's not my favorite player by a long stretch, but I've got the utmost respect for the way in which he came back into the game and did that. But the ceiling with that, we know what the ceiling is, but we're trying to win a championship, I'm told. So the two ethoses just do not align at all. And I don't understand what the plan is. And I've seen someone in the comments who's been posting away really good stuff saying, the decision they make on the quarterback, that'll be defined the next 5 years. Well, but that's how it works. And they chose to put themselves in this position and don't appear to have done anything to rectify it. And Russell Wilson wasn't everyone's favorite at the end, and maybe he had to go. I think we probably came to the agreement that both Russ and Pete had to go when they did, to give it a real just clean slate and start again. But I just don't really see what the aim is at the minute, because if you haven't got the quarterback, you're not going to win.
I mean, I think coaching it's very hard to judge a coach until you've seen them in action. But here's an example. The Minnesota Vikings coach has lost Kirk Cousins and then actually lost their backup quarterback. And they traded for Josh Dobbs and brought him in. He didn't even know his receivers' names. And they've won a couple of games. And they've also lost Justin Jefferson. And they've carried on. They've got the same, I think they've got the same number of wins as we have. They're just cracking on. If they lose to Denver tonight, or even if they win, I don't think anyone's going to have a meltdown about it. They're probably going to have a degree of confidence. And it's right now, what's the point of Pete Carroll? Apart from, if we're not going to play Pete Carroll football, if we're not going to run the football, if we're not going to finish, which is what he's, preached, then, well, why would you have Pete Carroll over somebody else? To me, it's very, very frustrating. On the quarterback thing, look, let me give you my thought on it, guys, and then you tell me what you think of this, because I think this is what they've ultimately done. I think they were very open to drafting a quarterback in the last 2 drafts. I think they correctly diagnosed that none of the quarterbacks were worth having in 2022, and good for them for being restrained enough to make that call when they just traded Russell Wilson. And then I think last year they studied and studied and studied. But I think they were so focused on the identity of the team and the personality and the character and the fit that in their world, as they were putting a roster together, they thought, right, Devin Witherspoon is perfect. He's the character, he's the physical type of player. We can't not have him. There's him, and there was basically him and Will Anderson, I think, were the 2 guys that were focusing on at number 5. And I don't think they would have drafted a quarterback at 5 based on, I heard from certain people that I spoke to a few days before the draft saying that they didn't think the Seahawks were going to draft a quarterback. And I think the more I've kind of learned about it, I do think it was basically Will Anderson or Devin Witherspoon with that number 5 picks. They thought character, physicality, fit, perfect culture. That's what they're going to go for. And I think they did. And then once the top 3 had gone off the board anyway, that was a moot point. And I think with Will Levis, what they determined was that for whatever reason, his character they did not want Will. And Will Levis is not a bad guy. I've interviewed him. I know what people at Kentucky thought of Will Levis. I can also see why the Seahawks did not want him to be the most important person in that locker room by drafting him in the first round and saying, we're now the fighting Will Levises. And I really like Will Levis, and I think he could have a great career. I'd rather he'd not gone to the Titans, but whatever. But I can understand why they moved off that. And for that reason, they didn't really have much of an alternative beyond sort of the top group once they decided they weren't going to draft Will Levis. And the others, they probably weren't going to draft, but they were off the board anyway. So they didn't really have much of a choice. Geno Smith fit their culture, the competition aspect. He fit the kind of person they wanted to be, the figurehead in the locker room for them. So they've gone with that. That has been their plan, I think. And it makes sense, but it doesn't solve the problem long term. I think the dilemma they've got now is because Gino's had a pretty mediocre year, very average season. It's not given anybody any optimism that he's going to lead this team to a Super Bowl. He's basically just confirmed that he's better than Drew Lock, and that's it. It does raise the question of what do they do now? I think they are going to draft a quarterback with their first pick in the next draft. I spent a ridiculous amount of time this weekend again watching. I had a weekend off, international break. Stayed up till 5 o'clock in the morning watching the Huskies play Oregon State last night. Thank you, Sky Sports. And watched all of the other games that I could on dodgy streams on YouTube. And I'm very confident that they will find somebody to draft, probably with their first pick. If not, I think they'll find a way to draft a quarterback in the next draft. But as I keep saying, they've put themselves in a difficult position because they can't realistically cut Geno Smith and save money, which they're going to need. They're going to have to find a way to keep Geno Smith. Otherwise, they will tip their hand. And if Geno Smith's play doesn't improve, or if he's going to be injured now, teams are not going to believe that the Seahawks aren't going to draft a quarterback anyway. So they're in a bit of a bind. Robbie, do you think that makes sense? That ultimately my theories on why they haven't drafted a quarterback make sense? Do you sort of align with that? Have you got any thoughts on that? And do you align with my thought that they're essentially setting themselves up to draft a quarterback next year, with maybe Geno continuing as a bridge, opening up a competition like they did with Russell Wilson, Matt Flynn, and Tavares Jackson, and going in that direction? That's what I think, but it is fraught with a bit of danger next offseason.
I think I would have originally aligned with your thoughts until they traded that second round pick. I don't know if I agree anymore. I think they're still banking on Geno, and I think they're I mean, I guess it depends on how the rest of the season plays out, but I'm not saying they won't draft a quarterback, but I don't think it's going to be an early round quarterback. They had all the ammunition they needed to last year to move up in the draft and get the quarterback that they wanted, and they didn't make that move. So I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily agree that they're trying to get themselves in a position to get a quarterback. I think if they would have kept their second round pick, then maybe I could have gotten on board with that, because then they would have had something to play with. I mean, you could still trade, I guess, future first rounds, but I'm having a hard time seeing the vision of where they're going. If I'm being honest, I'm having a hard time seeing.
How about this? How would your opinion change in any way if I was to say to you that maybe that was easy for them to make that decision earlier this year before the draft, with Geno Smith having thrown for 30 touchdowns and only 11 interceptions, and achieved a statistical level that some would argue was a top 10 quarterback? And does the situation change now that he's being projected instead to throw for, this has not been updated since today's game, 21 touchdowns and 13 interceptions?
Well, and that's why I said it. I guess we'll see how the rest of the season plays out, right? Because if he continues to downward spiral and plays real poorly, then yeah, you're gonna see a change at quarterback. That's going to be pretty obvious.
I just wonder whether or not if he'd have performed to the level he did last year, Robbie, I think I'd agree with you that they'd be comfortable waiting. I think the way that he's performed this year will have made them think, okay, he's a bridge quarterback. We're on alert now. We've addressed most of the other positions. We've got to do this. And look, we're talking about quarterbacks because we're talking about the future of the team. We're not lingering on this because no one's blaming Geno Smith today. I had a tweet all set to go after he'd got into field goal range to say, bloody hell, fair play. For those of us who've been critical of Geno Smith, well done getting out there with an arm strap on and winning the football game when your team needed you. But incidentally, by the way, I have seen Geno Smith has done an interview, and he was asked about what happened at the end, and he said his helmet went out, so he made the call to run the football with Zach Charbonnet before the field goal. He thought that was best. That was an error on his behalf. I really wish they'd just gone up there and spiked the ball, bought himself a bit of time, because you're only going to have two more plays max after that anyway. Snap the ball, take a bit of time. Just calm down. Just think about things for a second. Instead, he's got up there. They've run the ball and they've put it on Jason Myers. And then once you've run the ball once, that's it. It's a 55-yarder. So I blame Pete Carroll for that. It's probably Geno Smith's fault because he said that he couldn't hear anything and he just decided to go for a run and thought that was best. Adam, on the entire proposal of quarterbacks, why they passed, what I think they're going to do. Your take?
Yeah, look, I think I sort of said that last year was the year with resources, and now they're kind of back in the rat race with everyone else. But my question to you is that if they are, and I think we've discussed this a couple of times, if they're picking, let's say 22nd, there or thereabouts, given all of the teams above them that will have wanted to take quarterbacks, who can you see being there that will be good enough for Seattle to take at 22, but not good enough for everyone picking between the 9 or so teams ahead of them to have not taken?
That's a good question, that, and I'm glad that you asked it. And before I answer that question, I just let me drag up the stats, because I want to answer this properly. So what I would say to that is, first of all, I do think there are players that I rate. I mean, like, I just have to look across the media. So I've watched so much tape. There isn't somebody out there, whether you can agree with my opinions on players, or you can think I talk absolute rubbish. But there won't be anybody who's watched as much tape, because I watch everything. Like, I make a point. It's a whole week thing. I watch nearly every game. I have watched every game that these quarterbacks have played this year. When I see JJ McCarthy being touted as a first-round pick, I have absolutely no idea where that comes from. And yet you have people like Rick Spielman, who used to be GMs in the league, saying he's going to go in the top 20. And then I remember that teams drafted EJ Manuel in the top first half, like 16th overall. Somebody took Christian Ponder in the top. In fact, it may even have been Rick Spielman who took Christian Ponder in the top 20. These things happen all the time. And good quarterbacks, aka Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, because he's lasted, hasn't he? Trying to think, Patrick Mahomes was the 10th overall pick. Patrick Mahomes was the 10th overall pick. He didn't go first, second, third. He lasted to 10. The Chiefs traded up for him. Jalen Hurts, second rounder. Brock Purdy lasted to the 7th round. Derek Carr was a second rounder. The point I'm making is that good players don't just, there's not an established hierarchy of teams, of quarterbacks, and they go off in order. And if you miss out on those, then you are screwed. And when I'm sort of looking at what the draft media is saying, and look, a lot of draft media I think they rely on what people tell them rather than what they're actually, I don't think they're watching as much tape as they maybe let on. They will say it's McCarthy, it's people like this, and they ignore Spencer Rattler. They ignore Quinn Ewers. They don't speak as much about Brady Cook or, for example, Jaden Daniels, who's getting a bit more buzz now because of the insane numbers he's putting up. But I legitimately think there is a chance that Spencer Rattler could be a fantastic quarterback at the next level. Not guaranteeing it, because you can't guarantee anything, but he ticks every box, everything that I would look for. His ability to deal with pressure, his ability to throw with pressure staring in his face, the ability to throw layered passes, the ability to throw downfield on the run, to throw from different arm angles, to elevate his team to a level that they have no right of being. And 5 wins for South Carolina is unbelievable, quite frankly, given the paucity of talent on their roster. So I do think there are players who could be there for the Seahawks who can get this team to a new level. What I can't tell you with any assurity, though, is that they are going to get the next Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, all of the players that everyone's been coveting over the last few years. That there's a chance that won't happen. What I would also say is that given how I feel like we're kind of going through a weird year with the NFL, where certain quarterbacks are performing at a level that is completely unexpected, and others are playing really poorly at an unexpected level. And I'm starting to wonder is this a one-year thing or is this a trend? And could you get a quarterback within this system, such as it is, who could probably do what Geno Smith is doing right now, which is on pace for 21 touchdowns and 13 interceptions? Russell Wilson beat that as a rookie. My answer would be yes. I think that they can. So I think there is a chance, and I legitimately feel that they will draft a quarterback next year. That's not to say that Geno Smith was the problem today. He was not. The problem was, game management, So Gino takes a little bit of blame for that for the run at the end, but it's far bigger than that. Robbie, so the Seahawks are 6-4. Where do they go from here? Are they going to be a playoff team still? I can read the games out for you if you want.
No, I know the games. I mean, these next 5 games are crucial, and they're against very good football teams. So it's going to be, and I know people are going to say the Cowboys aren't a good football team, but I don't agree with that. I think they're well, I think they're better than us, to be honest. And I think it's the next 5 games are going to be really, really, really important. And if we can somehow manage to split with the Niners and pick up another win or two, then we have a chance to make the playoffs with this team. But if we don't, I think we're done.
Let me just run through the super. I've been missing on the super chats, and there's one that I found really interesting. So I'm going to do that, and I'll come to you, Adam. This one from Jesse says, "Ironic, the worst tackle on the field every week for us is called a safety." Love the stream, gents. Thanks, Jesse. Mark says, "It's not all Pete. We need to blitz more. Stopped after the second half. Till next week when we kick the crap out of the 49ers. See you on the dark side." Hope that happens, Mark. Really do. Really, really do. Especially because I'll be there. I really hope that it happens. But watched a bit of their game today. I don't think it's going to happen. Speaking of Niners, Keith Murphy, the unbeaten, says, "Laugh out loud. Sea chicken swept by the Rams. Go Niners." I mean, Keith.
Thanks for the support.
Keep supporting the channel, man. I appreciate it. You know, I've always had a bad feeling about Niners fans. Maybe I have to reconsider that after this. Thanks for the super chat. Jeffrey says, "I feel like being simple schematically is getting us beat by any head coach with a mildly creative scheme. What do you think? We have so much talent to look this bad, and everything looks so hard." Yeah, I agree with that, Jeffrey. And they definitely have more talent than a performance like that suggests. Adam, on the future, we said the 6 wins for Seattle have come against Detroit. It's a good win. Carolina, who are awful. The Giants, who are awful. The Cardinals, who are awful. The Commanders, who are awful. And the Browns were good. But I thought that was quite a lucky win in the end because of the great header from Jamal Adams. 6-4. San Francisco on Thursday. Dallas on the road the Thursday after. San Francisco on the road after that. Philadelphia at home after that. And then they finish out the season with a slightly easier run of Tennessee on Christmas Eve on the road, Steelers at home, and Cardinals on the road. Where are this team going?
Well, I'll start with a brief anecdote that might make the viewers laugh for the first time in the evening. So when the Seahawks signed Frank Clark after Nwosu got injured, I got so excited thinking that this team really fancy their chances, that they're just going to do whatever they can. They're going to go all out. That I hurriedly raced to the computer in the middle of a podcast interview with Adam Amin, and I had to get these flights booked straight away. And I booked flights for a 5-day trip to go and watch the Eagles game. And I've got a 15-month-old son. So it's cost me not only my trip, I now have to send my wife on an overnight spa with a friend of hers as sort of punishment for, choosing to go on this 5-day trip. Such was my excitement after the Browns win, thinking this is the season, boys. I've got to be there. I've got to be a part of it. And I think that little scratch of the eye sort of says it all, because I am slightly concerned that could be a game that the Seahawks end up dropping to 6-8, which I don't think is that. Look, Pete Carroll does not lose 5 games in a row. Surely that's not going to happen. So you've got to think there's a win somewhere. But I don't know. If you had to put your mortgage on winning any of the 4 games, Niners, Cowboys, Niners, Eagles, would you? I mean, I don't think I would at this stage.
I think you picked the right game. I think the one that you're going to is the one that they've got the best chance of winning. The Eagles, to me, obviously are very good, but that screams, late season Eagles just let one slip type of game. And I've thought that for a while, that the Seahawks would have a chance of winning that game. and then could even finish with a bit of a flourish. You know, the Titans and the Steelers and the Cardinals is not a tough end, and it'd be classic Seahawks to sort of piss away any chance of a proper, you know, legit run at the NFC West, only to sort of win the last, you know, 3 of the last 4 games and have everybody going into the off season thinking everything's hunky dory. I think they'll lose both games to the Niners, and I think they will lose to the Cowboys. I think that could be quite an ugly Thursday night of that, because if the Cowboys get on top of you, whew, and I don't think we're going to have an answer for Micah Parsons. And yeah, and the Niners they're a machine. They're an absolute machine. They're both finesse and physical at the same time. They're unstoppable and just grind you down. And could be a long night Thursday. Could be a long night. Could be as long as the flights. So that, yeah, that's my thought. So I think 1-3. If that's probably my guess in the next 4, which would put them at 8-7.
7-7 with the last 3 games.
Of course,
to go.
I'd already assumed they were 7-3 today. So 7-7, yeah, which feels, Robbie, it feels like a 7-7 team.
Yeah, that exactly. It does feel like a 7-7 team, and as I was chatting away, I was commenting a little bit in the live chat here with people saying playoffs. Why are you even talking about playoffs? They'd rather lose it. I'm not saying I want to go to the playoffs. Like with this, I don't want to go to the playoffs and get our asses handed to us in the first round again by somebody else and just be embarrassed. I just expected more, and I feel like this fan base deserves more. We've been, you know, rooting hard for this team for a long time, and you know, I know there's a lot of Pete lovers and such, and not taking anything away from him, but at some point there's got to be a change at the top to help this team go forward, and we have the talent. I feel like the talent is there. You know, I think it's just time for a refresh on the coaching staff.
But that's a good point that Robbie makes there, Adam, isn't it? There are a lot of people who they hate that idea. They can't stand the thought of moving on. There's very much a care for what you wish for mentality with the Seahawks. And yet it is 1 playoff win in 6 seasons, I think. 6. You know, this will be the 7th if they don't win a playoff game this year. And I have to say, you know, if they are going to be the 6th or 7th seed, I do not fancy them to beat the Eagles or the Niners on the road. If it's those 2 teams, or Dallas, if they somehow overtake the Eagles. So that'd be what, one playoff win in 7 years. You know, I think you said it well, Adam, at the start. Kind of what's the point? You know, I do think you need, you know, there needs to come a time when you go, how do you get to the next step? What is the next step? How do you get there? And for me, there are only 2 ways to get there. The Seahawks either need to draft a fantastic quarterback, not a good quarterback, like a fantastic quarterback who can just, you know, be the envy of the league, you know, be a top 5 quarterback, legit. You know, when you get through the rankings, everyone's like, oh, yeah, that player, yeah, because he's legitimately amazing. Or you need to get a set of staff, and Carroll needs to take a step back and just be a figurehead. And it needs to be an all-star staff who can just, you know, money can't buy level of staff, who Carroll changes, revolutionizes how he operates. But that's not going to happen, because Pete Carroll is very much, as he gets older, he's getting more and more, I want my guys. He's bringing players back all the time who he knows, who he feels he can trust. They're refining everything in their draft decision on character. Who is a Seahawk? We're only going to draft Seahawks. We're not going to go anywhere out of our comfort zone. We will know as soon as we meet this guy whether he's a Seahawk or not, and they stick to that. And his coaching decisions are very much in-house. There's no, like, Sean Desai came in, he was an outsider, he lasted a year and he's gone off to Philadelphia, and then they didn't even replace him. So I don't think there's any chance of that. And it kind of just makes me think, so what are we here? We're just a team that, are we just going to be having these kind of conversations every year until something changes, until Pete decides he's had enough, and that's it? And that, you know, doesn't sound that exciting. And I'm not somebody I don't hate Pete Carroll. I don't want to force him out. I just want to dream of the Seahawks winning a Super Bowl again. And we've seen this for too many years now. I don't feel like I can dream. I feel like I'm just sort of existing as a Seahawks fan, and Sundays give us something to do. I don't think it's necessarily a team that is on the brink of, having a great charge for a Super Bowl.
Well, Rob, I think this is my 3rd year on the live stream. And Rob, you and I have been podcasting, I think, for 5 or 6 years. And you can sort of add a note to your diary for November 2024 that we need to have the conversation of what's the worst that can happen if we get rid of Pete Carroll, because we've been doing it for the last 6 years. And people are saying in the comments, it's like Groundhog Day. Yeah, it is, because every year at this time, we have the same conversation. So what is the worst that can happen? Because right now, I would say we're in the worst thing that can happen, because nothing's happening. And yeah, look, it's nice to be on the relevant side of irrelevance. But that's basically where we are and have been since about 2017, on the relevant side of just, there or thereabouts. And I'm fed up of it. And I'm sorry if that upsets people. I'm sorry if people want to say, you should have seen where this team was 30 years ago. I don't care. I don't care. It's going to be 10 years since a championship game. That's not good enough if you've kept the same head coach the whole way through. It's just not good enough. And yeah, we're stuck in purgatory, as Brando said there. It just feels that way. But it's not that it feels that way now. It's felt this way for the last 3 or 4 years. And we've both been lambasted, Robbie as well, for even daring to bring it up. But it's not that we're not grateful about what has been. Of course we are. Won a Super Bowl. It's amazing. But there's only so much credit that gives you in the bank. And I'm done with it. And I loved it in the stream. I watch every game. I love talking about it. That's never going to change. But ultimately, it's time. And it's been time for a long time. But now it's really time. So come on. It's time for a change. It just is.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was well said. It's well put. And the team just isn't improving. Like, if you could see, like, if we were watching, wow, this is a noticeable improvement on last year. But it isn't, is it? The quarterback's worse than last year. The defense has similar issues. Oh, the run game's not appalling anymore, but the defense still doesn't feel great. It just feels like it's okay-ish, despite all of the investment in it. The tight ends haven't scored a touchdown. They don't seem to know what to do with them. DK Metcalf's regressed this year. They don't seem to know consistently how to get the best out of Jackson Smith and Jigba and Jake Bobo or the running backs. They don't refuse to run. That's not good enough. It's not getting better. It's stagnant. It's stuck. And it doesn't matter. The past doesn't matter. How good the Seahawks were 30 years ago or whatever doesn't matter. The whole point is to strive to be the best. If you're not doing that, then there's no point playing. There's no award for just making the playoffs every year. Which the Seahawks don't do. I think people you get caught up in that. They're consistent in the playoffs. Well, it's hard not to be consistent in the playoffs now. There's 7 of the buggers getting in the NFC. Like, it's every single year. You can be a 9-8 team like the Seahawks were, and you can get in. If you've got any super chats, send them in now. I've got a few more because we're going to wrap up in a bit. Hunter says, I'm going to the Thanksgiving game as well. Hope to run into you there. Keep up the great work, fellas. Yeah, Hunter, if you see us, come and say hello. And the same goes for anybody else. If you see us at the game, happy to chat. Jeffrey says, Pete can be a good coach, and we could need a new head coach and fresh ideas. Both can be true. Pete Carroll's a Seahawks legend. Doesn't mean he has to stay forever, though. It's been a long time. 2010 was a long time ago. It's going to be 14 years, next year. It's a long time. Kyle says, the same people that are afraid to fire Pete are the same people that are afraid to leave a loveless, one-sided relationship because they're afraid to be alone. It's getting very deep. Life is about risks, educated risks. Yeah, it is. It definitely is. Before I come to you guys for final thoughts, I will just say, don't believe the media on Caleb Williams. He's really good. Drake May is not as good as the media thinks, but he's still really good. Spencer Rattler's miles better than the media thinks. Quinn Ewers is very talented. I don't know if he's going to declare. Michael Penix Jr. has not played well since the midway point of the season, and well done to him for making enough plays. to get the job done in games like we saw on Saturday. But if you actually look at his completion percentage, how he's dealing with pressure, the missed throws since the halfway point of this year, there's been a big reduction there. Just pointing that out. Still got an amazing arm, still got a lot of talent. Jaden Daniels, very, very interesting. Ryan Leonard's still injured. Bo Nix is massively overrated by some in the media. Jordan Travis, my word, did you see that injury? Robbie, did you see that this weekend?
Yeah, I saw it.
Not nice.
No.
Not nice. And he can't go back to college either because he's had 6 years of eligibility.
Yeah.
Brady Cook's very underrated. At Missouri, I don't think he's going to declare, though. Will Howard had one of those games where he throws a really bonehead interception. JJ McCaffrey's overrated. And Carson Beck, he had his best game that I've seen him play for Georgia, but I'm still not going to put him at the top. I'll put this up. Look, before we get into final thoughts, you two respond to this. Will, it's not a super chat, I'm going to put it up. You cats are too negative. It's a league of 31 losers and one luckier than good playoff team. If you're wishing the Seahawks don't go to the dance, we can't. He's used a rude word there. Go Hawks. That, to me, is the classic useless retort to everything that we talk about. That is the kind of, it's just a waste of time. Like, none of us are saying we don't want to qualify for the playoffs. Nobody's saying that that we expect them to win the Super Bowl every year, anything like that. It's, our whole argument is around the team. My mind's frazzled because I get so frustrated when I see this. I'm going to hand this one off to you guys while I try and formulate my thoughts. Adam, why is that just such a lame response to the kind of detailed arguments we've put forth?
I think, and I'm hoping from the second half of it, that he's actually talking about some of the people in the chat that have been saying we don't care about the playoffs. Because, and Will, hopefully you're still there and you can sort of have the right to reply. But I don't think we've said anything about not wanting to make the playoffs. I think we're all utterly dejected because we've lost today, because we really want to make the playoffs. So yeah, I think just well off it if it's a criticism of how we're, look, not that we're gospel, and there'll be positive teams that will be positive podcasts and chats that will be full of the joys of spring and things will be great. Fine. That's not how we feel right now. It's why we record half an hour after the game, because hopefully you get the rawest emotions. But yeah, I think that's pretty wide of the mark. But
it is a criticism that's often leveled at us / me, is that we are too negative. But I don't know how you could watch that game and find a sinew of positivity. Like, it was a really bad game. Like, they blew that game. They absolutely threw that away. And it was all their own doing. The game management in that second half, as we've discussed at length, was not good enough. And just hoping for them to scrape by as a 6-7 seed in the playoffs, get knocked out, and then we all come back for another go next year. What's the point of that? We just want more than that. And I just feel like we're on a treadmill as Seahawks fans. It's just the same thing. I think on one of your podcasts, and I refer to it, it's like when you get to an airport and there's one of those like walkways that if you walk the right way on it, it gets you to the sort of the terminal quicker. But if you go the other way, you're kind of like walking, and because it's going the other way, you're not moving anywhere. And that's kind of where the Seahawks are every year. I want to see us make a breakthrough here, and I'm not confident anymore that this coach, this staff can get us there. I'm confident the GM can draft well because he's done it for the last 2 years. I'm not confident that this coaching staff can get us where we need to be. And I'm not confident that Geno Smith can win us a Super Bowl. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And complaining about that performance today, I think that's just par for the course. Robbie, have you got a thought on that?
Yeah, I think I kind of read it like Adam did, to be honest. And then I don't know if I really understand the last part of it, but I do think they're probably commenting on what I had said when I was like, well, I don't want to go to the playoffs and just get our asses handed to us. Obviously I want to make the playoffs. I've said, if you guys have followed the podcast ever, I always think if you get in the dance, you got a chance. And so, that's always kind of my mindset. But like, I also have seen us go there and just get dominated or play terrible and just be one and done and not, and just be embarrassed again. And I'm getting tired of getting embarrassed. So that's all I was referring to. Obviously I want to make the playoffs, there's something special about being in the playoffs. So maybe that's what they're commenting. I'm not 100% sure.
There's also this one here that says, let me find it. No Seahawks coaches, players deserve blame for this loss. The refs took the game out of their hands. When the NFL rigged the game in favor of their pet LA team, there's nothing the Seahawks can do. Because, of course, the NFL is absolutely desperate for the 3-6 Rams to make a late comeback with their vibrant fan base. And stuff like that. I mean, come on. The refs did not decide to run the ball twice in 16 play calls at the start of the second half before Geno Smith got injured. That was not the refs.
Did the refs cut out Geno's headset, Rob?
Yeah, must have done. They also
can't rule it out.
They also told Drew Lock to throw an interception. They were in the back there, going, throw a pick. And then he just went, okay, really? Fine. And the arm punt came out. It's just that the refs were not good, but the Seahawks, that was the Seahawks. The terrible management of the game cost them that. Last few super chats. This one from Save the Geese. This is a hard team to watch, especially with stubborn coaching and stupid decisions and how to build the roster. It won't compete without a quarterback. Thank you, Save the Geese. And Taker610 says it'd be hard not to make the wild card given the teams behind us. Pete would just be the next Super Bowl winning coach to be fired. No big deal. I mean, look at that's a good point. Like the Eagles fired Doug Peterson like 3 years after he won a Super Bowl and then went back to a Super Bowl with his replacement. You know, they are very aggressive. It's not the worst thing in the world. I can't imagine there were many Eagles fans going, careful what you wish for when Doug Peterson left. I'm just having a look at the playoff thing before we finish. Playoffs, NFC. So as things stand, the Seahawks are the 7th seed. They are the 7th seed today. If they lose to the Niners, they will still have a healthy lead over the other teams because the Green Bay Packers are currently 8th at 4-6. Obviously, the Seahawks have lost the tiebreaker with the Rams, who are 4-6. And then you've got Atlanta and Tampa Bay. It's going to be incredibly difficult for the Seahawks. The Seahawks, even if they stumble over the line, are going to be the 7th seed, whether they do anything or not. You know, in Philadelphia or San Francisco after that, or Santa Clara rather. Very unoptimistic, if that's the right way of putting it. Robbie, have you got any final thoughts? Anything that you want to share? Anything that you want to say? Anything that you want to talk about? Get into it now.
No, I mean, I see a lot of comments about, the refs and all these other things, or, people saying we're not real Seahawks fans or whatever. I mean, listen, I want my Seahawks to win every time too. Obviously, this is what we want. And I think that's why we're trying to have just a proper conversation about where we think the team is at, where we think that the team is headed, and like some of the decisions that have been made. I mean, yeah, we can't change the past, paying Quandre Diggs the amount of money that he did. We can't change that, right? But still bitch about it if it makes us feel better after a loss. Like, I don't want to lose, so it sucks. So if we have a opportunity to vent our frustration, just like you're doing on the live chats, that's all we're doing. We're frustrated as we're all on the same side. We're all rooting for the same team, except for the Niners fans that are coming in here and giving us some love for no reason. But I mean, we all want the same thing, and that's to be a Super Bowl winning team. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I don't understand why people are so, if you don't want to hear flowers and sunshine after that, then just don't watch this stream. It's not hard, My wife said to me, Rob, do you want to watch I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here? I just go, no. Like, I don't watch it. Like, I don't go, yes, let me watch it, and then go on a internet forum and tell everybody how I'm frustrated that I watched it. Adam, have you got any final thoughts? There's one of the super chats coming. If anybody else has got any of them, stick them in. But Adam, anything else you want to vent or talk about or bring up?
Not really a thought, but we often talk about sort of that final press conference of the season where Pete takes maybe one too many softball questions that we'd like. And I think one thing I'd love him to answer is someone said to him, Pete, your whole mantra is always compete, always get better. What are you going to do to be better? What tangible thing do you think you can do to be a better head coach for this current team? Because where you were once top of the, cock of the walk, king of the hill, it's not there anymore. And if you want to be the coach and you want to compete, you must think there's ways you can improve. And I'd love to know, with some truth serum inside him, what he thinks he deep down needs to do better to make this team where it needs to be, because it's not there. The team is not there. The expectation, what he preaches versus what we actually see, there is a massive discrepancy between the two, and it has been for too long. So there has to be a gap to be bridged, and I'd love to know how he thinks he could do it.
If I had a chance to ask Pete Carroll a question tomorrow in the press conference, I would say to him, Pete, you have always preached the importance of the running game. You have spent 2 second-round picks on running backs, and you have spent the last few weeks talking about how you need to get the run going because you feel you've not achieved that yet. Why are you so incapable of getting this running game going, and why are you not running the ball more? And there's follow-up questions to be had on that. It shouldn't be just you ask that, he answers it, and then you move on to how good's Bobby Wagner. It should be, no, and off the back of his answer, there's a follow-up there, and there's more and more, and you push on it. Like, for example, why when Drew Lock was in, were you not running the football? I want to know that. I want to know the answer to these questions. I'd ask him, have you got too many weapons? Are you actually finding it hard as a team to work out, okay, we've got 2 running backs, all the tight ends, all the talent receiver, who are we going to use, when are we going to use them, how are we going to make the most out of these parts, how are we going to challenge opponents with our options rather than just tie ourselves in knots, because I do think they do that sometimes. I think it's one of the reasons why they go whole halves without anything happening, is because they do tie themselves up in knots. They've almost got too many options, like a kid that's in a sweet shop doesn't know what to pick with its two quid. It wants everything and ends up probably coming away with the wrong thing. And feels a little bit like that. I think the most important question, though, I'd like to ask Jody Allen. What are your expectations for this team? We have never heard from Jody Allen. Jody Allen put statements out saying things like no intention of selling the team, all of this. I think it's all basically just a way to push that topic away from her as much as possible because they don't want it to be played out in the media, and I accept that. And the media are very grateful. Certain journalists are very good at saying that there's no intention to sell, yada, yada, yada. I think we all know that come next May, there's a decent chance that the process will begin. And it may take a long time or it might not. But next May is when it can happen, and I think the wheels will start then. I'd love to ask her, what are your expectations for this team? Because there is nothing worse than following a football team or any sports team where there's no direction from the top. If Jody Allen is just sat there in this role, I've inherited a football team. Hey, this is cool. I own a football team, or Vulcan owns a football team, which I'm, at the head of, or one of the heads of. Does she actually have a plan or a vision? Is there any sort of, okay, this wouldn't be good enough for me as the head person of the franchise? What we never hear from her. It troubles me more than I think a lot of other people, and I think it should trouble fans more. You need to know that the people running the franchise have actually got an ambition and aims and desires to win. There is a part of me that wonders whether or not it's just, well, we've got Pete and John, and that's easy and comfortable for me. I don't really fancy leading a coaching change. And as long as we're kind of ticking along and then most of the fans are okay, that's fine. But that's not fine to me. I'd like to hear from her. What exactly does her aims and ambitions? What exactly are the Seahawks under Jody Allen's leadership and Vulcan's leadership all about? Other than just sort of plodding along? I think that's a really important question. And I think it's about time that those answers were provided if she intends to stay in charge of the team. If not, doesn't matter. But if she's going to stay beyond next year and the next 2 years, I want to know the answer to that. And I think that's a very fair question. Noah says, is there a world where we trade for a top QB pick? I think there is a world where that happens, Noah. I think they could easily trade up for a quarterback next year. And I think they could pay a high price. They've become really aggressive again. And it wouldn't surprise me if they were all in next year, very aggressive to go and get a top quarterback. Would not surprise me at all. Also wouldn't surprise me if they made some big, huge trade to go and get a veteran quarterback. Don't know who it would be. I think it was going to be anybody. My guess would probably be Josh Allen. No idea whether the Bills want to trade him or anything like that. Haven't got a clue, but probably wouldn't. Probably a complete pipe dream. But I bet they'd put a call in if they were thinking of doing something like that. He's the only one I can think of. But that's my answer to that. I appreciate all of your super chats. Robbie, Adam, I appreciate your company as always and your views. It's always massively appreciated and expected. There's just one last super chat that's come in. This offense is 18th in yards and the defense is 25th in yards after playing Andy Dalton, Daniel Jones, PJ Walker, Josh Dobbs, and Sam Howell. Fire Pete. It's a very good point. Very good point on the defense there. I think a point that we will end on. Thank you to everybody who's been watching as well. Some really big numbers for this. I hope it's been slightly cathartic. I know some of you don't ever want us to be negative, but I think today called for it. So thank you to everybody who's watching. Please subscribe to SeahawksDraftBlog.com as well for more analysis. I'm going to go and write an article now because I'm a sadist. Subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like the video. Loads of you watch. Not so many like the videos, but it does help. Leave a comment in the comment section. That also helps. Please subscribe. This Thursday, I will be in Seattle for the game. So the live stream will happen when I get back to the hotel. I don't know, guys. Adam, it'll be like silly o'clock by that time for you. It'll be very late by the time I've got back. And Robbie, I don't know what your situation will be because it's Thanksgiving. So I do not, it may be a solo mission. I'm just prepping everybody now. But I will do a stream when I get back to the hotel from the game. If you see me at the game, come and say hello. I will not start ranting about the Seahawks, I promise, unless you want me to. But I am looking forward to it, and I'll be there in 2 days' time. So here we go. I wish I was going there off the back of a win. Never mind. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your weekend. See you Thursday night. Bye for now.